Pockets too fat, they sumo. Well, are people still here? Vin is always breaking the internet. I saw that Ultimate Musings. I only had room for one more caller anyway. Let me see. I don't even know if anybody can hear me. Let's see. Am I on private? I am on private. All right, let's see here. Here we go. We back? All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. I've got room for one more caller. What y'all want to talk about? Third time's a charm. Yay. All right, who's this? Somebody's calling me. Who is calling me? Nathaniel.
Washington. Last caller?
Who's this?
Nathan of Washington. Am I the last caller?
You probably are. You don't win anything, but you are the last caller. What's up, my guy?
Well, I didn't expect to win anything. Not that I'd want to, in particular.
So what's up?
Anyway, on the concept of what the subject was.
What, Acosta karate chopping that girl?
Oh no, karate chopping a girl?
Yeah, Jim Acosta supposedly karate chopped the young lady, and that's why he got his hard pass revoked.
What?
But, go ahead.
Anyway, so I think people fail to address something, is that I think people don't realize that there's actually two different varieties of feminism in reality.
Okay, go ahead.
There's like the regular ass feminism, and then there's the intersectional feminism. That's the one that's damaging.
Intersectional feminism is damaging. Okay, define intersectional feminism for me.
Well, to put it into some context, several Bolsheviks fled the Soviet Union and came to the United States, or they snuck into the system and became college professors. They started introducing socialist ideas, and thus created intersectionality.
Okay.
Which created the idea of equality in a socialist sort of sense, in a communist sense.
Okay, when did this happen? What year did this happen in?
Well, it doesn't come to a specific year, but the people who fled initially between the late 50s and early 60s, and made it part of the curriculum, and professors just kept learning it and teaching it.
I see. Who are these? Tell me what specific policy point is dangerous about intersectional feminism.
Well, to understand that, we have to understand intersectionality. It's a system whereby you claim that you essentially are barred from talking about a person's subjective experience unless you're a part of it. You can't criticize. You can't say anything good or bad. You are essentially cut off. You are not part of the in-group. So,
okay.
But they're free to criticize you a lot of the time.
Which intersectionalists have ever said that?
I can't give you any specific names, but I've seen and heard a lot about this many times.
From intersectionalists or from people criticizing intersectionalists?
Both.
Okay, so name me the intersectionalists you've heard say that.
I can't remember names. I'm not very good at remembering names.
Okay. All right. So you're saying it's dangerous because they're saying that you don't understand their experience. It's impossible for you to understand their experience. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it's dangerous because they cut you out of the in-group and then immediately use that position to accost your in-group. That's how it's used. That may not be what it's supposed to be, but that's how it's used.
Okay, but we can't name anybody who's actually doing this.
Again, because I'm just very bad at remembering names. I'm sorry.
Okay.
This ended up being a very disappointing call. I apologize.
Well, no, I think it's still instructive. I've heard a lot of criticisms about feminism, but when I'm looking for the facts, we're very thin on facts. How much of this is just you seeing stuff on YouTube?
I'd say that makes about 60% of it, and the remaining 40 is just like looking up like articles through Google and Bing.
Okay. I mean, I think, okay, so like Rebecca Walker.
Go ahead.
Rebecca Walker.
Rebecca Walker.
Yeah, you should look up Rebecca Walker and read some of the things that she's written. She's an actual third wave feminist. She does talk about intersectionality as well.
Oh boy.
I just think guys that we've got to actually let the main players of a given position speak for themselves. Because you get on a call-in show and you make these pretty definitive statements about a group or an ideology, but then you don't have any empirical data to support what you're saying. It's not a good look.
I know, I understand that. I do.
Right, that's why on the show, like, I'm willing to countenance any sort of disagreement, for sure. We've just got to make sure that we've got the data to support what we're saying. Because you can't offhand dismiss a whole group of people because you saw something on YouTube. I mean, I'm a YouTuber. Let me explain something to you. I'm a YouTuber. And when you have a channel, there's all this pressure on you to generate views, generate subscribers. So you're going to put stuff up there that's gonna attract the most attention. That's why anytime we do black metal, it's always Christians react to black metal, right? So you're gonna do things that are designed to attract attention from people. So if you YouTube stuff about feminism, you're gonna get fringe elements of feminism because that guy's trying to get views. If you listen to Miss Walker speak, it's very pedestrian and very matter of fact, and so she's not gonna get a lot of YouTube clips because she's not gonna generate a ton of energy around her. So you can be sure that if you see something on YouTube, it's most likely going to be fringe because those are the only people getting attention. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it is also true I run afoul of them on occasion through the internet on a fairly regular basis in the past.
Okay, and what happens when you run afoul of them?
Just the usual kind of stuff. They make this or that claim. Much like I have. I've made the claim without any data, and they do the same thing to me.
Okay.
But with a great deal more, shall we say, vitriol.
Yeah, they're pretty angry. And I can understand why.
See, I don't know why, because there's a lot in this society that favors women, and I don't see what they have that's so angry. It's like, do they even know what real misogyny is anymore? Today is nothing compared to way back when.
Yeah, I hear that as a black guy, too. I hear, like, hey, you guys aren't enslaved anymore. What's the problem? The fact that we've made progress doesn't mean we are where we need to be, right?
Well, I suppose that's true.
No, it's true. Like, for example, your founding fathers you started an entire jihad over the conditions that we're in now. I just posted this in one of my comments. One of the grievances, you had a whole list of grievances in the Declaration of Independence. One of them was, when your soldiers, speaking of British soldiers, kill one of our people, he is then subjected to a British trial, and then he is let off without any recourse. That was one of the grievances for that sparked the Revolutionary War. So when that was happening to white males, they started an entire revolution about it. You see the problem? So I understand slavery isn't here anymore in America, but we still got a lot of progress that needs to be made. And I would say that women in America have come a very long way, but there's still a lot of progress that needs to be had.
Progress on what? Catcalling?
Have you actually listened to any of these young ladies describe what their experience has been?
Yeah, I hear a lot of emotional fluff, not much of substance. Details are
like
often vague.
Like the details and substance you brought to this call?
I know. Remind me of my failings. Do it. Remind me of everything I've...
Well, what I want you to understand is I could just completely summarily dismiss everything you have to say because you came here with zero information, but I'm doing you the honor and respect of listening to what you have to say, right? Right?
Yes.
Let's say
respect.
Okay, let's say that these women do have a legitimate grievance. Are you saying that they should just come and approach the situation in a purely academic sense? Do you know how many of them have actually been sexually assaulted? How many women do you know? Like, personally?
I know several, and I am not claiming that they need to be completely academic, but they need to provide something to examine.
Okay, how about the rates of rapes in the United States? Would that count as actual misogyny? How about domestic? How about being killed in domestic violence situations? Would that count as misogyny?
Being killed in domestic violence, yes, that counts.
What about sexual assault?
I'm all for protecting women from domestic violence. I'm for protecting anyone from domestic violence, especially children.
What about sexual assault?
Well, the sexual assault data that exists out there, you can look it up on the internet. It's kind of skewed often in one direction, so it's hard to bring a clear conclusion.
What do you mean it's skewed?
It's true.
What do you mean it's skewed in one direction? Does that mean that men are committing the vast majority of sexual assaults against women?
Frequently, that's what it appears to be in the data.
Right, that's because men are committing sexual assaults against women. Are you saying that they're equivalent? That women rape men just as much as men rape women?
No, I would not say that.
So when you say skewed, what are you talking about?
What I'm trying to say is like so many people within certain spheres do, is they try and skew the data into their favor by counting little things or one-offs that aren't as bad as others. Try to conflate it.
Who gets to determine who gets to determine what a little thing is in regard to sexual assault? Who determines that? You?
Okay, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
What is worse? Someone tries to use a term of endearment, or someone pinches you on the ass. Which counts as sexual harassment?
Well, it depends on what the term of endearment is. If the term of endearment is my little whore, then I would say that those are equivalent.
No, I don't think I've ever even heard a guy actually do that before, honestly.
I've heard it. I've been in the corporate world for quite a while. I've heard it. I've heard all types of craziness. What's your point?
corporate world. Anyway, my point is like a lot of them will complain about perfectly harmless things, like
my brother. Who determines what perfectly harmless is? Who determines that?
Well, you gonna make a complaint when a stranger just calls you pretty?
Are you saying that the rates of sexual assault reported by RAIN are women saying that somebody called them pretty?
What I'm saying is small things that do no harm get exaggerated and conflated and are included in the data somewhere.
Okay, where is your empirical evidence that demonstrates that?
Where's my empirical data evidence?
I mean, don't you think that with something that carries the gravity of sexual assault, you know what happens in Deuteronomy if you're caught sexually assaulting a woman? They stone you to death.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So that carries a capital crime. Don't you think that with something this heavy and this egregious, that you should at least, if you're going to speak about it and dismiss it, you should at least have some data to back it up, lest you dismiss something or trivialize something that's extremely important?
All I'm trying to say is that the answer...
Can you answer that question? Can you answer that question? Why are you so freely throwing out these I'm going to just tell you, false facts? Why are you okay with doing that for something this heavy of a topic? I mean, we're not talking about who's going to win the Super Bowl here. We're talking about something that's completely soul and generationally destroying to people.
I'm just going to have to be the better man and admit that you have straight up wrecked me on this, and I will concede.
No, hold on.
I will concede.
No. It's not about wrecking you, because we already established right from the beginning you don't have data. I'm asking a deeper question here, and I think that it's an important conversation to have, because I think this illustrates why we still need feminism. This is not a debate point, brother. We're talking about human beings who are being completely ruined and destroyed by these types of actions. And because you haven't experienced it, you're okay with getting on and spouting all this craziness about it and just completely dismissing it. And what I'm saying is, isn't that extremely problematic? Forget about not having the numbers, but the very attitude of coming on here and saying things like this about such a sensitive topic. Like, don't you think that something's going on there?
I think there's something going there, yes.
This is from nsvrc.org. 91% of victims of rape and sexual assault are female. 91%. Okay. 91%. That's an issue. And if we took the feminists out of our communities, and if we took the feminist voices out of our communities since the 60s, there would be, think about this, these women have been screaming from the hedges since the 60s, and in 2016 the number is still 91%. So if they didn't keep talking, then we'd have people coming on saying, "Hey, I was just catcalling you. What's the problem?" The problem is, if 10 people get raped, 9 of them are going to be females. That's the problem. And Republicans are usually, right-wingers are usually worried about money. Sexual assaults account for more than $127 billion every single year. So, look, the numbers are there. Babe, can you type this in? nsvrc.org. And then, of course, you have, that's the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. I just think that I think that this discussion indicates why we still need to have feminism. Much love to you, my guy.
Yeah.
Did you have something to say?
Huh?
Okay, have a good one.
Right.
Jeez. All right. Well, that's why we have the show. Look, there's I don't have a problem with like debating and having fun and things like that. I just don't want us to lose the human element here. So we need to figure it out. We're dealing with human beings here, and sexual assault's a very real thing, and women are disproportionately the victims of that particular type of crime. What were we gonna say?
Well, Dan was saying that he said, I did get an HR complaint against me when I told someone that it'll be okay, honey. The HR personnel, she worked it out because she knows that's how I talk. And then Svetlana said, honey.
Svetlana.
Yeah, Svetlana said, I mean, honey, I don't understand how that's a crime. I know for me personally, like, being in different work environments and feeling very uncomfortable because of, sexual comments, or even just like people feeling like it's been all of my life, like men just thinking that they can be closer to me than I'm comfortable with them being. And so even something that seems so small as honey can make me feel very uncomfortable if I don't really know you. And that to me is like, you're more comfortable with me. That's like, I only call people hun that are like close to me, very close to me. So when somebody says that and you're just like, you just met them, it can feel very uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable with just anybody. I'm more comfortable with that now as I'm aging. But especially in my teen years and in my 20s, that made me super, super uncomfortable, because that was always like basically like a starting point. And then they would ratchet it up and say more and more stuff until, sometimes it'd be, hey, sexy, what's up? I don't want you calling me sexy. I'm not comfortable with that. And that, and then there's always that uncomfortable thing about like, gosh, like I'm uncomfortable with this. Should I bring this to HR? But then it makes a weird work environment. And it always did. I saw a girl bring something to HR and it really made a mess of the work environment. And I think she ended up quitting too because it was so awkward. But it shouldn't be like that. But.
And reporting something to HR isn't a crime. It's just, the HR basically functions as a buffer. So it's not a crime. But this is what happens when the previous caller was saying things like that, like somebody calling somebody honey gets factored into the sexual assault data. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets dangerous, because that's not what's happening. And those are not what's being called as criminal. That's not a crime. I mean, I agree with Peterson when he says men and women haven't been working side by side like this for the majority of history. So we're going to have a hard time figuring out how to navigate around each other. I completely understand that. Because I get people in my job that call me hun or honey or whatever, and I'll be working and they'll say that, and I'll look at you and you're like, what does she do? So like, I get that, but that's different from what I was talking about with the previous issue for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't think guys mind so much though. I mind, believe me.
You do? Only because of me though. But if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't care, right?
No, it's kind of weird to me.
Oh, really?
I'm not very affectionate and stuff, so like that all gets channeled with you.
It depends.
Other than that, I'm good. I'm not your honey.
It depends for me.
Barely your honey.
Like, jeez. It depends for me, like where it's coming from. Like if it's somebody that has a southern accent, I'm more okay with it because I'm like, okay, they all say that. They call everybody hun.
Listen, Svetlana, I'm Russian. People say, hey, sexy all the time, but if you report it, nothing happens.
They say it all the time?
Oh, she's Russian.
What do you mean? Well, how does that... What do you mean?
Genji, I saw what you said. I'm sorry that happened. For real. But Sometimes you go through that stuff so that your daughter doesn't have to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
I didn't see it, so I can't.
And that's why I'm not going to wait till my daughters go through it to be a feminist. See?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Gershok.
Johnny said,
I think human trafficking needs more exposure. A girl from my church got God almighty.
Pretty recently.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, the human traffic thing is crazy. It's modern day slave trade. You know what I mean? And that's what so the caller earlier was talking about how strippers. He's like, nobody's putting a gun to their head. I'm like, how do you know nobody's putting a gun to their head? You don't know how these girls end up in those situations.
How many of them have you personally talked to?
That's why I'm saying like legalizing this stuff is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, sure, yeah, let's legalize, prostitution and things like that. And then the girl is doing it voluntarily, but there's some dude that kidnapped her across state lines, and then he's threatening to kill her and her whole family if she says anything.
Wow.
Good Lord, that's a whole other ball of wax. And look, I think, but even like the subject of honey, baby, blah blah blah, like equating that with sexual assault. Feminists are not equating that with sexual assault. That's harassment. They call it harassment.
Yeah.
But nobody's calling for 25 years in prison and such for saying, hey, baby, or whatever at work. It's usually an HR issue and it's resolved. And I've worked with some pretty hardcore clipped-haired feminists in my day. They're not calling for people to go to prison for that. So, like, this equivalency, but this is what happened. It's like, once rape and sexual assault gets real, we start really clamping down on it, and then it's like, oh, I can't do anything.
Yep.
No, it just, you can't grab girls by their junk.
Right.
Unless they ask for it. You know what I mean? Like, God. And then it immediately goes to these ridiculous, points of view where it's like, oh, now we can't do anything. It's like, it's like, oh, I can't say nigger. I guess I can't say anything. I can't even call you by your name.
Right.
No, you just can't say nigger.
Yeah,
that's
right.
what that is. God almighty.
Yeah.
No, it's true, Jen. And there's a lot. Eventually, we're gonna have some, discussions about why women aren't having these discussions. And I remember I hit a point where after a while, because we were dealing with a lot of downtown work, and after a while, I just looked at Sawyer. I'm like, has every woman been assaulted? Because it was just pandemic down there. Yeah. And I'm sure in the inner city, they're a lot more vulnerable. But
I think that what happens
terrible.
Is it's a generational thing that keeps happening. And so, like, when the mom has a daughter, she doesn't like address it so much with her daughter because she has some story from her past that she's already feeling guilt about, even though it wasn't her fault. But she feels that, and so she doesn't want that to come up in the conversation. And so then it's not an open dialogue. And so somebody has to break that and say, okay, look, this happened to me, when their daughter's at the correct age for that and stuff. And then open that discussion with your kid. Like, even if you didn't handle the situation well, or you regret things about the situation, talk about those things, and make that a conversation that your daughter can talk to you about and that can be open, because there's so many people that have had things happen to them that don't talk about it. I mean, the majority of people that we talked to, which was almost 10 out of 10, hadn't reported what happened to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this 91% or whatever the percentage is even not that accurate, because the majority of people don't do it, because a lot of times assault comes from someone within your family. And so then there's always this, oh my gosh, like, we don't want the name of our family, or should I really, this is my mom's brother, or, this, you know what I mean? It can make a real mess. So unfortunately the victim gets, the victim is the one that has to suffer in silence while the perpetrator carries on with life as usual.
Who's on the line?
Hey, man, this is James.
James, my brother. Hey,
Hi, James.
Gershok, you'll be the last caller. But I had to talk to my brother James. What's up, James?
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going good. What's on your mind, bruv?
Hey, listen, I just dialed in, so I'm not sure if this has been already discussed or not. So if it has, then feel free to end the call. But on the topic of the sexual assault understanding or misunderstanding, don't you think that Me Too kind of screwed it up for the rest of the population?
That who?
Me Too.
Me Too movement.
Do I think Me Too screwed it up for the rest of the population? In what sense?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of cases of the guys from entertainment industry who were taken down for pretty much non-sexual acts, haven't been labeled sexual predators or sexual assaulters. I don't know if you're familiar with the case of Garrison Keillor.
The only one I was really watching closely, and I'm going to sound really ignorant here, but it was the Asian dude. He's kind of Aziz Ansari.
Yeah, it's kind of the same category basically. I mean, I know that Aziz was up until today. The name of the woman is not even known, and there's not really many specifics to that to that particular event. But Garrison Keillor's case is pretty much very well documented, and in his case, he inadvertently touched a woman on her back when her shirt was open, and he profusely apologized for that, and she accepted the apology, and he followed up with an apology in the form of email the next day, and she still accepted the apology, and then 10 years later, she accused him of a sexual misconduct, and he got yanked from his own show that was on for 30 years.
I mean, I don't know anything about that situation.
Yeah, but... I mean, again, you're sitting in front of a computer.
Well, I've got the article in front of me right now, and it says, the Washington Post says, NPR says Garrison Keillor wasn't fired for simply touching a woman's back.
Well,
but the reason...
There's probably like 10 or 20 different accounts of what actually happened, and that's the thing, you know. I mean, you get to the point where you don't know who to believe anymore.
Yeah, the reason I didn't contest what you had to say was, even though I had the article in front of me, I haven't done any research on it. So even though the article goes against what you're saying, I wasn't going to say anything because I haven't done any research and I know how media works, right? So I do think, though, that, don't you think that the Me Too movement, let me just tell you what I perceive the Me Too movement to be, and then you can tell me if I'm, and believe me, I'm in the corporate world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've had employees invoke Me Too on certain issues that we've had to investigate and all the rest of it. So it isn't this like automatic trigger that automatically results in the termination of somebody's employment, because that's not what happened in our case. But the Me Too movement seems to me to be about women finally speaking about the past issues that they've had with men in power abusing that power sexually over them. I mean, isn't that pretty much what the Me Too movement was about?
Well, it was the original when they came up or stood up against Harvey Weinstein, right?
Right. He was
and the Harvey Weinsteins of the world.
Right.
But it seems that the consequent waves took out guys with much. Well, let's say that Weinstein's acts were criminal. I definitely agree with that. Cosby's, but he hasn't paid the price yet for it. I don't know if it's for lack of evidence or lack of witnesses. But so far, it seems that the only real, or let's say, legal case that was brought up that went through the legal system is the Cosby's case. But other than that, it seems that everybody else, yeah, I mean, careers got ruined, But
Well, yeah, you had Kevin Spacey.
yeah, but again, no criminal charges, right?
Well, yeah, I don't think the Me Too movement wasn't about criminal charges per se. Let me just read, though, because NPR fired this guy. And the overarching narrative is he touched a woman's back 10 years ago and he apologized, and that's why he got terminated. According to NPR, the woman who made the allegations worked for Garrison on a Prairie Home Companion, which was produced by Garrison's media companies. In the allegations she provided to NPR, she did not allege that Garrison touched her back, but did claim that he engaged in other unwanted sexual touching. In a letter to NPR dated October 22nd, 2017, the woman's attorney described dozens of sexually inappropriate incidents directed at her client over a period of years. So in the incident that you brought up, it wasn't that he mistakenly brushed against her bare back. She made dozens. There was a 12-page letter detailing many of the alleged incidents, including excerpts of emails and written messages, requests for sexual contact, and explicit descriptions of sexual communications and touching.
Then this particular article must have skipped my radar.
This is NPR.org. These are the people that fired him.
Okay, then I'll look into it.
But this is exactly the reason why I believe Me Too needs to be a thing. This whole conversation. Initially, it was, oh, she had her bare back exposed. He accidentally brushed up against it. He sent numerous emails and apologized. And then a decade later, they came after him. Now we're looking at it, and he sent her text messages. He had unwanted advances. He gave her extremely graphic images of what he wanted to do with her, apparently. And there's a 12-page letter detailing all the shit he was doing, James. And again, I'm not talking about all these people need to be put in jail. What I'm talking about is in the workplace, men are generally in positions of power, and they have been able for decades to abuse that power with impunity, and it puts a woman in a situation where she has to decide between her career and her integrity and her dignity. And what I'm saying is, when there is a movement that creates some fear in a person from doing this, I think that that is positive. What happened with Aziz Ansari, terrible, absolutely horrible, but it came out and the majority of public opinion says Aziz Ansari did nothing wrong. Okay? So I'm with you on that, but in this particular situation, your exact call to me seems to be the exact reason why we need this movement.
I didn't say we don't need it. Don't get me wrong. Again, I'm not against it at all. I totally oppose any kind of abuse of power by either gender, towards the inferiors, especially if sex is involved. And I've worked in media myself, or in corporate world, so I've seen that happen. So no, I mean, I'm not saying that these guys are, or their existence is not justified at all. That's not my point. My point is, like I said, that sometimes with some cases, and again, I guess I didn't research the Garrison's case as closely. I probably should have, or not probably, but should have. But in some cases, it seems that especially the semantics, meaning the words being thrown out or thrown around, like sexual predator or sexual assault, are being misused in a lot of cases because there just is no evidence of such acts.
Well,
but let me also ask you this: Louis C.K. case. I mean, all those chicks consented to him masturbating in front of them. So was he a sexual predator?
Well, I don't think that those, again, this is a situation I'm not familiar with, but I don't believe that I don't think consent and being a sexual predator are mutually exclusive terms. But again, you'd have to tell me. I hate talking about, I don't even like talking about I'm on the website right now for NPR, and they said what they said, and I even hesitate to do that, but what happened with Louis C.K.? What happened with him?
Oh, okay. Well, you know who he is, right?
Yes, he's a comedian,
Okay.
right? He's a comedian guy.
Right.
Okay.
So Louis C.K. Again, about 10 to 15 years ago, had this weird fetish where he would invite his female comedians to his hotel room, and during the course of conversation or the girls being there, he would ask them if they would mind if he would masturbate in front of them.
Okay.
And most of the chicks actually consented to it.
Okay.
And years later, his career, and in this case, for this kind of fetish, if not ruined, then definitely interrupted temporarily, because of, or as a consequence of this. But there's this big debate whether he would fall into the category of sexual predator because he had the consent of his quote-unquote victims.
Yeah.
And he never really used his power to, he would not lock the door of the hotel room. He would not punish the girls in any way, shape, or form if they did not consent to him doing it.
Yeah.
So, again, is
Well,
he or is he not
I
a
think-
sexual predator?
Well, I don't think that's a question for me, because to me, a predator is somebody who goes after somebody to gratify his own sexual urges, and you can do that with or without consent. The question, though, to me is it the same type of infraction as what we just described in the previous situation, where these were clearly unwanted advancements and this girl was being very obviously sexually harassed? And I wouldn't put it in the same bucket, no. But a lot of these things, when you talk about morality, James, are on a continuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, is it the exact same thing? No, obviously not. But is it still a negative thing that we want to discourage? Absolutely. Because here's my problem, James. Okay. and think this through with me. And if I'm crazy, tell me I'm crazy. That's fine. Here's my concern about that particular situation. He is a person in power who has made it in show business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my fear is, and this is kind of what happened with Weinstein, why he got away with it so much, that there will be, he put those girls in a situation where they either consented to him as this powerful person in Hollywood, where he got to a level where they wanted to be, or there's kind of like the underlying, you'll never work in this town again if you don't do what I want you to do type of thing. And so my concern is, do the power dynamics in your mind factor into how consent operates for you? Does my question make sense?
Can you elaborate if there is a way?
In other words, and like I said, I haven't read anything about this, but if he were to say, if you don't let me do this, then I'm gonna badmouth you to everybody in the industry. And Hollywood is a pretty elite industry. And a lot of it has to do with who you know, not necessarily what your skill set is, right?
Right.
So having all that as a setup, and a couple of those girls thought to themselves, I am really not comfortable with this, but if I say no, I'm going to be on the outs with this guy who has a lot of power in this very elite club called Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Would that inform your perspective on what consent means in that situation?
Please call them women and not girls. They're women. Multiple people are asking that.
But how do you position that consent into that situation then? Consent to what? To consent to.
Well, I'll answer that question.
To consent to answer his sexual advances.
Well, I'll answer that question in a second, but do you understand my original question of, does that inform your understanding of consent? The fact that he has this power to influence what happens in their careers, right? Does that influence your understanding of their consent? Because he's not some regular guy who said, hey ladies, can I just take my clothes off and masturbate in front of you? He's not some regular dude, right? Like, I'm looking at his website right now. Do you think that if he was some regular Joe, that he'd be able to get those women in his room?
Well, it depends on how skillful he is. But
well, just make an assumption.
But yes, you're right. His fame, but also probably his personality, helped him bring those women in.
And his connections, right?
Most likely, but he compared to Weinstein, he would not be no one close as powerful as Weinstein.
I agree, and he didn't do the things. That's why he didn't do the things that Weinstein did, right?
Well, that's not necessarily the reason. I mean, he might just not be as wicked as Weinstein is.
That's true. But can you answer my question? Do those power dynamics factor into your understanding of consent at all?
To some extent.
Okay. So then it's not as simple as saying.
I wouldn't necessarily equate the two. If the two are compared.
No, I don't think there's a one-to-one correlation, but I do think it's not as simple as saying, hey, they consented, so he's innocent. I think that the subtext of that entire exchange was he's a dude in a position of power, and everybody knows how the game goes in Hollywood, and a lot of it has to do with connections, and he took advantage of that. On the other hand, those women were not helpless little waifs who were held there against their will, and at some level, they're responsible because I'm not going to take their autonomy from them. So what I'm saying is that's an extremely difficult situation because he doesn't look completely innocent to me, even if they consented. You see what I'm saying?
No, I agree with you. Again, I would not call him completely innocent. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, he has a certain fetish, or maybe not anymore, but had at some point of his life, that he sought acting upon, in the company of women. Hard to say how he would choose which women he would try to act upon it with, because there is just not enough evidence, or none of us knows. Only those who were present in those hotel rooms.
Did you read his apology?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, he technically, he was one of the few who was not ousted by any kind of movement. He basically left the world of intimate on his own with a letter that he put out, I believe, almost now a year ago or something like that, or maybe earlier this year. And when he admitted that he had this issue, he didn't necessarily say what exactly it was, but then some women came out and described what was happening. And then he's currently on a hiatus.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's the same as a previous issue that we talked about that you brought up before. And I do think the waters get extremely murky because there's a lot of unspoken things happening. You see what I'm saying? Like, hey, I could completely ruin your Hollywood career. Even if he's not saying it, that subtext is there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he didn't force them to do anything. So, like, there's no criminal charges that you could do. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, here's where I'm at with this, okay? And you can tell me if I'm completely crazy or like half fascistic about this, brother. I'm at a point right now where I'm like, if he gets used as an example, like if I were to say, look, this is a gray area, okay? You've got a loophole because you technically didn't do anything wrong, but if you do this shit, this can happen to you. You could be the next Louis C.K. If that stops somebody from doing that, then I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm completely good with that. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And does that make me? And so, to your original question, from that perspective, I'm still good with the Me Too stuff. I'll tell you right now, I am not good with the way the Democrats handled the Kavanaugh situation. That I have extreme problems with. For sure. Right? But
yes.
this right here, the whole Me Too thing and all that, like it's creating an environment where dudes who would previously do this thing without impunity now have to stop and say, shit, this could really tear up my career, and I'm glad. I hope it continues to happen.
Of course, I mean, I'm glad that the industry was put on notice that this type of behavior is no longer acceptable. But like I mentioned, as one of the consequences, the waters are somewhat murky, and I'm not surprised that a lot of guys don't know what or how to behave around women anymore. And
well, I mean, yeah, I just don't think that that's true. I think a lot of dudes know how to behave around women. I just, and Sorry tells me all the time that I'm an outlier, but I just look, bro. I've had jobs where women have been in my office for hours, and in my particular line of business, I work with a ton of women. I've literally in my entire career never had an HR complaint filed against me for any form of sexual harassment in any way, shape, or form. Okay, I don't believe that women are out to looking for ways to falsely accuse men of things in the world. I don't think that that's what's happening, and I also don't believe that. Look, I think that he knew. I think Louis C.K. knew that if he was just some regular Joe on the street, that he wouldn't have been able to pull that off. And the only thing I would say is he needs to conduct himself around females the way that he would if he was a regular Joe on the street and if he didn't have all that power. It's that simple. It's like we can relate to women by persuading them instead of trying to overpower them. Right? Like that's kind of that's how we need to relate. And if a man is saying, I don't know how to relate to a woman outside of power dynamics, then you got a problem.
No, I understand that, but I mean, I can give you a personal story. I mean, I got 12 or 15 years ago, fired from a job where I was working for this transportation company, and I would get my gas at a particular station before the end of my shift, and I would build up just nothing really like close, but let's say better than average relationship with one of the girls who was working at the gas station.
Yeah.
And one of these days, we were talking about music, and she asked me what I listened to. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm bringing some CDs, so you can make your own opinion about the music I listen to. And she changed jobs around within a week or so after, and I just wanted to get my CDs back. So through the manager of the gas station, I was able to find out where she works. And all I did was I went to her next employer, where she wasn't on that day. I left my business card there and asked politely if they can have her call me back. And I left that place. And from that place of employment to my place of employment, it was about, I believe, 20-minute drive. These guys called my employer, and upon me coming back to my place of employment, I was fired.
Okay, on what?
For stalking.
Did she say you were stalking her?
She made up a story that I was some kind of a, guy who was after her, and she didn't want me around. That was her side of the story, which had no bearings on the truth whatsoever. All I wanted was just pick up my CDs and move on with my life.
Honestly, I can see how that would happen, because when I was working at the grocery store, this man used to come in and he would talk to me all the time. I was very uncomfortable with him talking to me all the time, but I didn't know how to say, stop talking to me. I would just talk to him. He would ask me questions. He would tell me about his life. I didn't want to have any of these discussions with him. And he got very comfortable with me, and I wasn't comfortable with him at all. And he did, like, he started, like, kind of like showing up. So if she left that, she may have left that job because she didn't want to say, hey, stop talking to me. And then if that was her reason, which I'm assuming that was, when she went to the next job and then you showed up at the next job, then it does look like a stalker situation.
Yeah, but if she doesn't see, this is.
But I don't see how his job fired him when they're just going off hearsay from the other people.
But this is the thing, is like, and this is why I say I'm not going to take women's autonomy from them. And so when you have autonomy, you have responsibility. You have got to open your mouth and say something. If you feel uncomfortable with the nature of the relationship previously, then you got to open your mouth and say something. And we've had this conversation with the girls.
I know.
Because that's one of the big things that I talk to the girls about all the time. You have got to speak because nobody's going to speak for you. So, like, to me, that James situation is crazy to me. Because it's like, let's say she was feeling uncomfortable before. How's he supposed to know?
No, I know.
You know what I mean? Like, that's great. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, to Sori's point, I'm not the kind of guy who would initiate conversation with a woman. I always wait until they initiate conversation. And I'm pretty good at reading, the voice and reading the body language to know whether it's just a small talk or whether there's a genuine interest, right? So if it was just a small talk, which I hate, I wouldn't try to go into any kind of a, deeper conversation with pretty much anybody for that matter. So, but I'm saying that this type of a conversational relationship took time to develop, right? And like it was mainly initiated by her, not by me. So I was dumbfounded when I found out, that I'm being fired for being a stalker. I mean, it was crazy to me, because she even invited me to her place, which I never went to, to hang out and whatnot. Prior to that, so I was a little surprised when I heard these quote unquote charges.
Well, that's why you've got to. I mean, even the Old Testament, you got to say something.
No, I know.
You got to speak out. You can't. And that's the other side of this, is that these ladies in Me Too did a very, very risky thing by speaking out publicly. But hopefully we can create an environment now where if you're uncomfortable, say that crap early and often. Because...
Well, I think that some of it is just training our children when they're young. Like what Jen and I were saying in the chat, and I don't know if you guys already went over this, but like people in my vicinity were appalled when I started saying, no, I'm not going to make my daughter hug anybody and everybody in the family. If she doesn't want to hug you, she's not going to be forced to hug you just because you're family. Right. She's not comfortable with it. And like, I think that that's something that hasn't really been done. So you don't I don't know, you have to develop that in people. And so when you haven't been able to develop that all your life, and now all of a sudden you're in your 20s and you're uncomfortable, but how do you say that?
I get it, but a person shouldn't lose their livelihood.
No, I agree.
Because you're uncomfortable with expressing yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, and if she would have told her prior employer, hey, this is why I'm not here, I'm leaving for this reason, then the prior employer wouldn't have probably given the next... He shouldn't have done that anyway. The boss before shouldn't have given out that information. My gosh, he should have said, let me get a hold of her.
Oh, where she was working.
Yeah, you can't just do that.
All right, James, I appreciate you, my brother.
Sorry that happened to you. Did you end up with a better job, or how did that work out?
It was kind of ironic. It was my first job in America. And yeah, I did. I did end up with a much better job. So.
Yeah, welcome to America.
It was a learning experience.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
Well, he got a better job out of it.
Yeah.
So even sometimes bad things can turn out for your benefit.
It was a qadr of Allah, James. You're good.
Yeah, it was funny.
All right, buddy. Much love to you.
Okay, guys. Take care.
Bye.
think
Bye-bye.
we're gonna peace out now. But if Gershok is still on the line, then yeah, I mean that whole that's a tough situation with the Louis C.K. thing.
Oh, I thought you were saying about his situation. I can just totally. When that thing was rolling out, I was like, oh boy.
All right, hold on. Where is it? Oh, I think Gershok is calling. I told him that didn't that kid from the movie yesterday look like Gershok when he got his mustache? Look like him, didn't he?
I don't think so. I can
look at it
see
again.
where you would say that, but that kid in the movie was kind of.
All right, who's on the line?
Yo,
Hey.
it's X.
You sound terrible, my guy.
I'll tell you what, you do not envy me right now.
Well, you're a rock star, so I kind of envy you. But go ahead.
And your corpse paint came out good.
Yeah, maybe the smoke is my fault.
So what's up, man?
I guess to get this out of the way quickly. So, do you actually know about what's been going on with the YouTube sort of blackouts?
No.
No.
What happened?
Markiplier had a pretty good theory on this, which I'm actually pretty inclined to believe, which is he's talking about how Google Plus had to be shut down because of some embarrassing privacy leaks that have been going on. And since Google Plus has been shut down, it's been causing a problem because back in 2011, I think, that was when YouTube was forcing people on YouTube. That was when Google was forcing people on YouTube to integrate their YouTube channels to Google Plus. And now with Google Plus shutting down, all of these issues have been happening. I think that might also be linked to all the channel terminations going on as well.
Channel
And-
terminations? Have you said?
Yeah, one like that happened with mine. So the thing that's been occurring a lot is that it seems as though every time Google has tried to come up with a fix for it, it just results in YouTube completely shutting down for a little bit, and they instantly have to undo it.
$1 trillion company, and this is what we're reduced to.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like this should not be excusable at this point, right?
Yeah. I know. It's 2018, X.
I know. Yeah.
What is happening?
They really shot themselves in the foot on this one, I think. Anyway, that's not really what this call is about. So your question, right, is feminism still necessary in 2018?
Yes. What's your answer?
My answer is yes, absolutely. Like, they're just not even a question for me.
Well, I mean, come on. There's a female chancellor of Germany. X, what's your problem?
Give me a sec. I have to breathe a little. Listen, there's a lot to unpack here, so I'm just going to take a moment to just go off. So, the thing about feminism is that this is something that my girlfriend has been like very much in support of ever since we got together, and hearing it from her perspective has really like changed the way I see this thing too. But what I'm noticing about feminism in 2018 is, or more even so, like in 2017 especially, is that this is kind of like the female version of like what was going on in the civil rights movements back in like the 60s and 70s. Is the thing that for the longest time, women fought for their right to be able to do something, but there was no real empowerment to even do those things now that they finally had the ability to do it. So recently, like, it seems like females are all getting together to make sure that they are like they have each other's backs. They're saying, no, you can do this now. Like, you don't have to keep everything quiet. You don't have to let everybody trample on you. Like, now that you have the ability, you shouldn't act like you somehow still don't have the ability. You should exercise those rights that you were given.
Yeah.
And that's like a major theme. A major theme I'm noticing.
Yeah. It's the walked out reality in daily life. Like, for example, sexual assault has always been illegal. but there have been certain dynamics in the workplace that have allowed it to happen, i.e. Harvey Weinstein. And so it's like, even though they didn't have to stand for it and allow it to happen, there were still so many power dynamics to where they were kind of put in a crazy corner that they had to deal with. And so Me Too comes out, and now it's like, whoa, they can actually act on the rights that they already had in the first place. And that's...
Me Too coming out actually had a completely interesting effect too, which I think someone brought up, is that with Me Too coming out, suddenly, oh my God, all of these reports of like female harassment, or I'll say like women being harassed in the workplace in particular, like all of these are coming out of nowhere ever since Me Too got started. But to that, it's like, to me, it's no different than what happened when people started like diagnosing autism more regularly in classrooms, is that all these people who for years were misdiagnosed as having ADHD are now being correctly diagnosed with autism. And now all of these correlations are coming up that's like, oh, there's like a random surge of autism happening. That must be in the vaccines or something. There must be some airborne pollutant. It must be chemtrails.
Yeah.
And the same thing is happening here. It's like, now that Me Too has given a platform, like finally a platform, naturally you're going to see a lot more of this come up in the time being. And everybody, like a lot of people against this, are trying to find their vaccine equivalent for like a justification on this.
Right. Vaccine equivalent. Right. Yeah, there was a freaking Matt Lauer thing, which was ridiculous. Did you see that one?
The what?
Matt Lauer, he had some button under his desk, and he'd lock these girls in.
Yeah.
And,
Are you serious?
Yes.
yeah, it was
God.
like, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what is going on here? And that, it went from Me Too. We'd have never found out. We would have just thought, hey, it's Matt Lauer from the Today Show. It's madness.
That's crazy.
This thing has just been like constantly coming up in like the field that I do this thing too. It's like, I never before have seen so many women actually becoming a part of the metal community. Like, it always was seen as this, like, this is a guy thing. Like, like the guy, metal was seen as the man cave of musical genres.
Yeah.
But since we've, since 2017, there have been all these like female fronted bands coming out. And at the same time, people like Amy Lee from Evanescence, came out on record saying things were not this easy for females around the time Evanescence came out on the scene. And they, in particular, had to fight way harder than necessary to even be taken seriously.
Yeah, I remember them. I remember Kitty. And it was like this. It was like a gimmick thing at first, before you could even like respect them as musicians before, It's crazy.
Now it's like some females are going out there and like painting themselves up like the Butcher Babies, and like some of these females are more metal than you guys out there.
Yeah, OTEP, like forget it.
Yeah.
You don't want it with her. You don't want no smoke with OTEP.
Here's the thing, though. As much as I would love to have that thing, I didn't exactly call up just to agree with everything or anything. I have my own sort of qualms with this situation too, and my qualm is mostly that I very much appreciate that feminism is going on, and that it's actually giving women finally a chance to sort of speak their vices. But the one thing I feel that ends up happening is that one other aspect of like these social politics gets neglected in the act. And for me, it's like the way children are being treated these days is what really gets to me. Is that like, justice for females gets covered all the time, but I feel like we're seeing less coverage on like the mistreatment of children lately, and that is still an issue that I come up with like a lot. I don't really want to get into anecdotes as much, but like it's like the whole pedophile ring that gets brought up all the time in Hollywood. You know how many people just get swept under the rug on that stuff? Meanwhile, someone like Harvey Weinstein doesn't get off as easy.
Right. No, that's it's hard to keep all these things in tension and balance. But you're right. You're right. There's a lot of this stuff that's getting swept under the rug and ignored, and it's based on who has what voice.
That's the thing, is that it seems like, I guess, like, I always tell myself maybe we're just not quite there yet. Maybe we need to work on the sort of the female rights and that whole wave first, and then hopefully in the next decade or years to come we can sort of reprioritize to something that's even less discussed. But my issue comes up whenever these things actually do get discussed and they get overshadowed by something else. Like, I mean, I know this is a really old example, but there is the time when Bernie Sanders went to, give a speech in Seattle, and his whole entire platform just got taken away from him by, like, these two black ladies who wanted to make the whole thing all about Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
There's no question that Bernie Sanders was already on your guys' side.
Well, I mean, yeah, the guy actually did time for protests in the 60s and 70s, obviously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was, that was ridiculous.
But this is the kind of stuff that happens that, like a lot of the times, like, I try to bring up these issues with, like, injustice towards children, and being in the music industry, or like even if it's like a local underground bands and stuff, that comes up, I think, even more than, like, abuse to women comes up, is abuse to, like, the children, because they are so much more impressionable. It is really sad to see.
Yeah, you're 1,000,000,000,000% right on that, bro.
Oh my god, I can't breathe.
Do you have any music around that topic?
Which topic? All of it?
Children?
Around children in particular. Not yet. I've definitely brought it up with the other guys, but it's like, it has to be something we all feel equally sort of, I guess, militant about, if we were to really get upset about this kind of thing. But I do actually have a couple songs that are sort of low-key based around family abuse. And that's kind of like based on some personal, like, growing up issues I've had.
Yeah. What song is that?
That one is the one that ends the album. It's called Germ.
Okay.
And I mean, you guys can check that one out if you're feeling brave, but, I don't really want to have another moment of you guys, like, reacting to Korn's Daddy.
Whoa. Okay.
I don't think it's quite as hardcore as Daddy is, mostly because, like, the time that one came out was so much different from now. But it's, like, more personal whenever I talk about that kind of stuff. It's not like we're all banding together to, like, bring out the awareness of this thing.
Yeah. No, I see where you're going. I would be interested. I mean, do you think it's possible that all of you could be equally as militant about it? I mean,
Steven has a good point. He says people don't talk about children getting abused because it is 9 times out of 10 a family member, not a stranger.
Yep.
But that's, like, what's the worst part about it, is that that's just, like, so many of these children, like, just, they feel like they have no voice, like, nowhere to go to. And anytime one person, like, and this is what comes up with me a lot, is anytime someone says something that they're feeling being expressed, in music by somebody else, they feel so connected to that they'll just start, like, getting uncomfortably close with us for that reason. I have people who message us from, like, Slovakia saying that they heard our music, and because it spoke to them so much, like, they'll call me up all the time, like, just telling me everything that's going wrong with them. And I just wish I could do something, but, like, in Slovakia, I just can't in California.
Well, I mean, keep putting out the music, my guy. That's your gift. That's your weapon. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I swear to God, do you have, like, there's conversation a lot with, like, especially, like, underage girls, is, like, ones that will come up to me and they'll start getting, like, really flirty and stuff, and I get it, you know. A lot of these, like, coming of age women will start to explore themselves, and they'll, like, kind of inappropriately take it out on people who are much older than them. So I've always made it so that rather than, like, trying to avoid them or shame them, I'll just sit them down and explain to them why stuff like this is a thing, because they'll always say, like, oh, well, I'm 17, it's not that bad, is it? Like, no, here's exactly why it's bad. It's like, I won't take advantage, of course, but there are people out there who will. And if we do away with laws like that, then it's going to open the floodgates.
Yep.
And that's, like, the one thing that you do not want to have happen.
Yep. I completely agree with you. Gersock.
So, yeah.
Is it Gersock? Gersock?
What?
I'll never pronounce your guys' name. Gersock.
Gersock.
Cool.
You know, it's funny, Vin, because you'll always get it right, and then you'll start to, like, doubt yourself on if you were right after you've already said it right. But I can't really complain. Like you've said yourself, we're in a position that we really can't take for granted, so I'm not going to get mad at you for it.
That's right. Good. You're getting a lot of good feedback in the chat, by the way. By the way, if you don't know, this is a genuine, bona fide rock star, but he's not abusing. He's not abusing his power and his position. He's using it to educate his sisters. That's what we need to do. God Almighty.
Oh, man. I've not been catching up on chat right now.
It's like here's a moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, and particularly the gentlemen. I have this conversation all the time with one of the kids. I always say, don't try to look for the loophole reason for why you're not at fault. If you have to appeal to the loophole, you already lost. Mm-hmm. Do what's right. Do what's most right. Don't go after the loophole to create your innocence. Mm-hmm. The minute you start going after
loopholes all the time, but I don't think that really, like, negates the entire movement as a whole. I mean, a lot of things that happens are some people will very inappropriately use this new platform to speak out on really bad behavior and then take the whole entire group of people down with them. But the thing about that is, like, anytime, like, a woman will come out and use feminism as, like, this way to justify them being a terrible person, the first people who will speak out against them are other feminists.
That's right.
Everybody, like, not just the guys. Like, feminists will be the first one to say, like, no, you're not speaking on behalf of us. Get out of here.
Yeah, they self-correct with the quickness. And what X and I are trying to do is self-correct our brothers. That's all. Don't get mad at us. Don't get mad at us. But if you're the type of dude that wants to, like, completely hide behind, well, she didn't say no, and that's loopholeism. Do what's right. That's all. Okay. We got to get out of here. Vin out.
Sorry out.
Yeah. X out.
Gone.